You imagine that control is strength. You imagine that to hold the reins tightly, to grip the steering wheel until your knuckles pale, to map the future in careful ink and refuse surprise, is the mark of a serious and responsible human being. But consider this. What if control is not strength at all, but a trembling hand disguised as certainty? What if the urge to control is the most refined, the most socially acceptable, the most invisible form of fear? Picture a man standing in the ocean. The tide moves in vast, rhythmic intelligence, rising and falling with lunar grace. Yet this man, with furrowed brow, attempts to command the waves. He shouts instructions at the water. He scolds it for its unpredictability. He builds elaborate sand barriers and declares, "This far, and no further." And the sea, of course, continues. Now we smile at such a figure, because the absurdity is obvious. No one commands the tide. And yet, in subtler ways, we do precisely this with our lives. We attempt to command our thoughts, our feelings, our lovers, our children, our aging bodies, the weather of the world. We demand that tomorrow conform to today's anxieties. We draw lines in shifting sand and call them security. But life is tidal. It pulses. It moves in cycles of gain and loss, birth and decay, laughter and tears. And the more tightly we try to fasten it into place, the more it slips through our fingers like water. Why? Because control arises from the assumption that there is a separate I standing apart from a current, an overseer who must manage the flow. A tiny monarch in the skull issuing commands to the vastness of existence. Yet when you look closely, where is this monarch? You say, I must control my anger. But who is the I, and who is the anger? Is the anger not also you? Is the controller not simply another thought appearing in the same field as the anger itself? The mind invents a division, and then struggles to reconcile it. This is the curious game of control. It divides what is whole and then labors to reunite it. Fear is at its root. Fear of dissolution. Fear of chaos. Fear that if one does not manage every detail, everything will collapse into ruin. And yet, notice something astonishing. Your heart beats without your command. Your lungs draw breath while you sleep. The sun rises without consulting your calendar. The galaxies spin in silent precision, and you have never once tightened a cosmic bolt. Life is happening, effortlessly. The grass does not strain to grow. The tree does not wrestle with the wind. It bends, and in bending, it survives. Control says, I must hold everything together. Wisdom whispers, it is already held. But the ego is uneasy with this. It says, if I let go, I will disappear. It imagines that surrender is annihilation, that to release control is to fall into a void. Yet consider sleep. Each night, you surrender completely. You relinquish control of thought, posture, and narrative. You allow consciousness itself to dissolve into darkness. And in that surrender, you are restored. You do not fear sleep. Why then do you fear surrender in waking life? Because the ego equates control with identity. It says, I am the one who manages. Remove the management, and who remains? Here lies the subtlety. Control is not simply about organizing one's schedule or planning for the future. Those are practical tools. Control becomes fear when it is driven by the refusal to trust the process of life itself. When you cannot tolerate uncertainty. When you demand guarantees from an inherently unpredictable universe. And so you build routines. You rehearse conversations before they occur. You attempt to secure affection by becoming indispensable. You calculate outcomes. You anticipate rejection before it arrives. All in the name of safety. But safety from what? From change? Change is the very texture of existence. From loss. Loss is the other face of gain. From death. Death is the partner of birth in an eternal dance. To demand permanence in a world of flux is to argue with reality. And reality never loses an argument. Control, then, is a protest against the nature of things. It is the shaking fist at impermanence. It is the whispered plea, stay the same. But nothing stays the same. Not your face, not your friendships, not your ambitions, not your moods. And here is the great irony. The more you attempt to control life, the more anxious you become. Because control requires constant vigilance. It demands that you monitor every variable. It insists that you stand guard over an ever-changing landscape. It is exhausting. Fear disguised as responsibility. Imagine holding a cup of water. If you grip it too tightly, your hand cramps. If you attempt to freeze the water so it will not spill, you destroy its fluid nature. But if you hold it gently, aware that spilling is possible, the hand relaxes. Life is meant to be held gently. You see, fear believes that letting go will result in catastrophe. But have you noticed that some of the most beautiful experiences in your life were unplanned? The conversation that lasted until dawn. The journey you never expected to take. The love that arrived when you stopped searching. Control would have prevented these. Because control prefers predictability to wonder. Now this does not mean drifting aimlessly or abandoning all discernment. It means recognizing that you are not separate from the flow you are trying to command. You are the wave. You are not a little captain steering a hostile sea. You are the sea expressing itself as a particular crest and curl. When the wave attempts to control the ocean, it is fear. When it realizes it is the ocean, it relaxes. And what is relaxation but trust in the deeper order of things? The kind of trust that does not require proof. The kind that allows you to act wholeheartedly without clinging to outcome. You see, control is always concerned with outcome. It says, I will only move if I can ensure the result. But life does not offer such contracts. It offers participation. Dance without knowing the final step. Speak without scripting the reply. Love without guaranteeing permanence. This is not recklessness. It is aliveness. The paradox is this: when you stop trying to control everything, you become more responsive, not less. You move with circumstances instead of resisting them. You discover an intelligence deeper than calculation. Like a skilled sailor who does not command the wind but reads it. Fear tightens. Awareness opens. And in that opening, you begin to sense that what you called control was simply an attempt to avoid vulnerability. To avoid feeling the tremor of uncertainty in the chest. But that tremor is life. And if you allow it, it becomes not a threat but a vibration, a pulse, a reminder that you are part of a vast, uncontrollable miracle. Now let us look more closely at this miracle and the peculiar habit of the human mind to stand against it. You see, the mind has a curious habit. It does not merely experience life. It comments upon it. It narrates it. It evaluates it as though it were a critic sitting in the balcony of a grand theater, peering down at the stage of existence and whispering, this scene should go differently. And from that whisper, control is born. We do not simply feel sadness. We say, this sadness must not be here. We do not simply experience uncertainty. We say, this uncertainty must be resolved immediately. We do not simply love. We say, this love must last forever. And so we tighten. Now notice the pattern. Every attempt at control is an attempt to solidify what is fluid. To carve stone out of water. To freeze a dance mid-movement and demand that it remain fixed in some ideal posture. But life is not a statue. It is a dance. And a dance that does not move is no dance at all. Imagine listening to music and insisting that a particular note should never fade. You cling to it, you attempt to hold it in place, but in doing so, you destroy the melody. For music lives in the rising and falling of sound, in the interplay between presence and absence. So too with life. Control is the refusal to allow the note to fade. It is the fear that silence will follow. Yet silence is not the enemy of sound. It is its partner. Without silence, there would be no rhythm, no contrast, no meaning. In the same way, uncertainty is not the enemy of security. It is the condition that makes security meaningful. Loss is not the enemy of love. It is the frame that gives love its poignancy. But the ego trembles at this. It seeks permanence because it imagines itself to be fragile. It believes that if circumstances shift too dramatically, it will shatter. And so it constructs identities. It says, I am this kind of person. It gathers possessions, achievements, opinions. It builds a narrative of control. Yet ask yourself, are you truly controlling your life, or are you clinging to a story about it? You may say, I planned my career. But did you plan the inclinations that led you there? Did you design your curiosity, your talents, your temperament? Or did they arise, like weather patterns, from a deeper current? You may say, I chose my partner. But did you choose the chemistry, the mysterious pull, the feeling in your chest? Or did it happen, as naturally as a magnet drawn to iron? The more deeply you inquire, the more you begin to sense that what you call control is participation in a much larger unfolding. You are not the author of the script. You are the script happening. This realization can be unsettling, because if you are not the isolated controller, then what are you? You are the process itself, the breath breathing, the thought thinking, the universe playing at being a human for a little while. And when you see this, control begins to soften. Consider the paradox of love. The more you attempt to control the one you love, the more distant they become. You monitor their behavior, analyze their tone, demand reassurance. You seek certainty. And in doing so, you suffocate the very thing you wish to preserve. Love thrives in freedom. It blossoms when you allow the other to be as they are, without constant correction. Why is this so? Because love is not possession. It is resonance. It is the harmonious meeting of two moving patterns. And harmony cannot be forced. It must be allowed. The same is true of creativity. The artist who strives too hard to control the outcome finds the work stiff, lifeless. But when the artist enters a state of surrender, something extraordinary happens. The painting seems to paint itself. The words write themselves. The music plays through the hands as though guided by invisible intelligence. This is not magic. It is alignment. When the illusion of the separate controller relaxes, action flows without strain. There is effort, yes, but not tension. There is engagement, but not anxiety. You begin to sense that life is not a problem to be solved, but a pattern to be danced. And yet, many resist this view. They say, if I do not control my life, I will become passive. I will lose ambition. I will drift. But look carefully. Is the tree passive because it does not force its growth? Is the river passive because it does not plot its path? They move with tremendous energy, yet without strain. Non-control is not inertia. It is cooperation with the nature of things. When you cease fighting the current, you discover that the current carries you. And here we touch something subtle. Control often masquerades as virtue. It says, I am responsible. I am disciplined. I am prepared. And indeed, responsibility and discipline are valuable. But when they are fueled by fear, they become rigid. True responsibility arises from awareness, not anxiety. It is the difference between steering a boat with sensitivity to the wind and clutching the rudder in panic, convinced that disaster lurks at every gust. Fearful control says, if I do not manage every detail, something terrible will happen. Trusting awareness says, I will respond to what arises. One is defensive. The other is alive. And perhaps the greatest illusion of control is our relationship with time. We attempt to control the future as though it were a territory waiting to be conquered. We plan, we forecast, we simulate outcomes in the theater of the mind. We replay the past to extract lessons, to prevent repetition. But notice that both past and future exist only as thoughts in the present. You cannot control tomorrow. You can only act now. And this now is not a thin slice between two infinities. It is the whole show. It is the only place where life is actually occurring. Control projects itself forward. It says, when this happens, then I will be safe. It postpones peace. But peace is not a future achievement. It is a present orientation. When you relinquish the demand that life guarantee your security, something astonishing happens. You feel lighter. Not because uncertainty has vanished, but because you are no longer resisting it. The heart still beats. The world still changes. But you are no longer at war with it. And this is the great awakening hidden within the simple act of letting go. Not letting go of effort. Not letting go of care. But letting go of the illusion that you are separate from the vast intelligence moving through all things. When you realize that you are not an anxious fragment in a hostile universe but an expression of the universe itself, control loses its urgency. What would you need to control if you trusted that the same force that spins galaxies also animates your breath? What would you fear? Now let us move even deeper into the delicate space where surrender and action meet, where freedom is discovered not in domination, but in participation.